So, hey, my name is Daniel, and this is Zach, and we're here to talk about the new Netflix series called Daredevil that just came out a few days ago. And holy shit, this is an awesome show. All across the board, Marvel hit it out of the park again. Granted, there is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but
which is not that great.
No, it's not. But you do need to check this out if you have Netflix. And if you don't have Netflix, man, pawn off your friends because this show is awesome. Right off the bat, the first episode, we jump into the scene where his dad, I can't remember the actor's name, but he plays Matthew Murdock's dad. And obviously it's the classic scene, the accident that happened, which is actually kind of in the comics. When I looked it up, he actually pushes a guy out of the way and gets the chemicals in his eyes, and that's how it all started. And then we hit the church scene, which was pretty cool, where he's talking to the guy. It was really slow, but it really got us into the character, what he was about to do.
Yeah, and I liked how there was the origin of the preacher and his relationship, because in a lot of things they just kind of boom, he's friends with this preacher. We don't really know the backstory on it, but in the new Daredevil series, it's just kind of like he comes in and he's there and he's just confessing he's a normal Catholic, and he just met the father, and he was like, the father is just kind of like, all right, well, who's this guy who's confessing these really awkward confessions with us? I thought that was kind of cool, and then throughout it, you kind of get the brotherhood that the two of them kind of form, like the father-son kind of relationship that they got going on.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't go into deep that much. I understand because maybe they don't want to get too religious in the show. But that's one of the unique things about Daredevil, that he is religious. And that's what makes him such a complicated character, because he's doing all these things that are counterintuitive to his beliefs, whether he believes it strongly or not. But they never really delved deep into that. But the first thing I want to talk about is Charlie Cox. I think this guy, a lot of people were kind of head scratching their head because they didn't know much about him. Some people knew that he was from Boardwalk Empires, a show that I really like, that I'm still not finished with yet, but I heard he was great. But man, this guy hits it out of the park. I think he is perfectly casted. There's a reason why they cast him. Him being as Daredevil, I mean, the guy can shoot action scenes, but it's not just his action scenes. It's the acting. I mean, you just buy into this guy. You buy into this character. And I think him and Foggy Nelson.
Oh my God, Foggy.
Foggy Nelson is awesome as well.
He is hilarious.
He's the focal point of the comedy in this series. But, you know, he has some dramatic moments as well. Maybe not as serious as some of the other actors, but I do feel like he's the comedic relief in the show that you need, because the show really does get dark and really violent.
It's kind of like, I finished it. I watched it 2 days. I just marathoned the crap out of it and just watched so much. I got so focused on watching all of it. And I noticed that Matt Murdock's character kind of has a problem of getting into trouble and then getting really deep and dark into his thoughts. So having a character and a best friend like Foggy, it kind of relieves him of all the problems that are going on in his head, which is one of the coolest kind of just things that they have going off each other. The contrast between the two, yet the brotherhood the two have, is awesome.
Yeah, and also Karen Page, which is played by Deborah. Is it Deborah Wall? Yeah, that's her name. Deborah Wall. Hot. So hot, but she's also a pretty good actress. I didn't think of her first because I wasn't too sure about her acting skills, and we're gonna get on some other ones that we thought was really bad.
Oh yes.
But because the show is not perfect, but it is still awesome. But the more we get into her character, like, I was just like, oh no, she's a really interesting character. She's not like the super goody girl either. You know, she has some secrets in her past. Mm-hmm. And if you know anything about Karen Page, and her family history in the comic books, it's going to really be interesting to see where they go. I know in the comic books there was at one point where she became a porn star, which is really odd, and she was hitting real low, but we're not there yet. I don't know if that's a spoiler, but I don't know if they're going to go there, but considering it's on Netflix, they can go in a lot of different places. We just don't know. But it's also interesting the time this takes place, because if it's true, because I don't think Marvel has confirmed, but they haven't denied. I think they have confirmed that this is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.
That takes place with Avengers and Captain America and Iron Man and all those guys.
They said that Daredevil was actually going to gonna have some sort of crossover with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which honestly I don't care for, but I'm excited to see just kind of like Arrow and the Flash are doing, that they're crossing over into these other universes that kind of gives you this web that's just kind of mixed together.
Yeah, and also it's the first time we actually see a TV show that worked for Marvel, because it's such a different take on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is so directly tied with the Avengers, and so it's so hard for them to really do anything creatively. Whereas here at Netflix, it's in this one centralized location in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, and it's really interesting because this takes place right around the same time in our real world, and in Hell Kitchens today, it's a really safe place to live compared to what it was 20 years ago, which is kind of the reason why Daredevil exists in the first place, because it was inspiration of how bad Hell's Kitchen was.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're also, and we're kind of trying to scratch our heads figuring out, like, why is he trying to defend a city that's really not supposed to be bad, but that's where the Avengers tie in, because the attack on New York City, which they vaguely mentioned in the show, is the reason why Hell's Kitchen is in the condition that it is. And I thought that was really interesting. And so
they do reference the Avengers too. There's multiple points when they're like, you don't have, or like there was one part where he's like, you don't have an iron suit or a hammer of lightning and thunder, and I'm just like, dude, automatically reference to the Avengers. Perfect reference. It's kind of just off key. If you don't really catch it, you won't miss anything. But if you do catch it, you're just like, yes! Finally, the connection is where you want to be.
Yeah, and also there's a ton of Easter eggs that I haven't seen. Maybe you guys have seen it. And so if you do know, like, put that in the comments below of what Easter eggs we might have missed, because I don't think I'm going to get to all the Easter eggs, because there's so many in just the first 6 that I've seen. I have not seen the whole thing like this guy did. But the other cool thing is, well, we can't go too far without talking about Fisk. And oh my gosh, this guy is just such a menacing character. Because at first, I was like, oh man, this is a really good show. But then when he appears at the end of episode 3, when he's in the art gallery, like, we didn't get to see him much, but then like there was just like this kind of tension that was built in that scene. And we're like, okay, now I see what we're getting ourselves into. And then in the 4th and 5th and 6th episode, oh my goodness, this guy is such a great character. And I think his name is Vincent D'Onofrio.
Vincent D'Onofrio.
D'Onofrio. Look at me
But
mispronouncing.
he does a great job.
Yeah.
And when you see him in the art gallery, they give you, like, he sees that piece of art, he's just like, man, this really speaks to me. And he hasn't seen it yet, but when you get to his backstory, they go into this huge detail on why it calms him and all of that. And I'm not going to spoil any of that for you. The backstory for it was incredible. It explains who and how he got to where he is. And a lot of you who have only seen the first 6 episodes or so, like Daniel has, you're sitting there, and if you have read any of the comics or you've seen the last Daredevil, you know that the Kingpin that they're portraying in the show on Netflix is not the same as the Kingpin that's in the comics. The Kingpin in the comics just wants to rule Hell's Kitchen. He doesn't want to save it or anything. He just wants to be the Kingpin. He wants to rule over all the gangs.
It's a difference, yeah.
The entire first season, and I didn't realize this until now, it's as much of an origin story for the Kingpin as it is for Daredevil himself. So the whole thing is explaining how the two of them both got to their points, and I think that was a great point for the entire show. So when you're watching those first 6 episodes, you don't really get who he is as a character. In correlation, you get glimpses when he just kind of snaps, or like when he kills Vladimir's brother, which was gruesome beyond all belief.
Oh,
and
yeah. Fire violence.
Very beautifully made at the same time, because I don't think that anyone except for the directors of the show would have made something that could have been that gruesome, yet that beautiful for the storyline. It was perfect. It was spot on accurate.
Yeah, so I think he's been great, and also his assistant as well that does a lot of the boatload of the work for him, Wesley, which is really cool because he's not a guy that's in it for the money or power. He's doing it because generally these two guys actually genuinely care for each other. And they have this respect.
Best friends.
They have this respect and this loyalty, and I think that really creates a different dynamic. Because in the beginning, I felt like he was just your typical, messenger, and I mean, he kind of seemed one note, but then further on in the episodes that you go on, like you see his character building up and stuff like that, and so I thought that was really interesting.